The Farmer and the Millionaire. Old Jacob Weaver had spent most of his life on a small farm in the heart of the countryside. His weathered hands, cracked by decades of hard labor, could tell stories of sweat and toil. He had never sought luxury, never cared for fame, and certainly never needed the attention of city folk. His farm, with its animals and simple life, was enough. One cold winter morning, Jacob received a letter that seemed out of place. It was from an airline company, offering him a free first-class ticket to a destination of his choosing. The letter explained that it was part of a promotion for loyal customers who had purchased supplies from their stores. Jacob didn't know much about flying, but the idea of traveling far away intrigued him. He had never left his town, except for trips to nearby markets. So, after much deliberation, he decided to visit New York City, somewhere he had only ever heard about in books and on the radio. The flight was a long one, and Jacob, in his work boots, faded jeans, and plaid shirt, looked quite out of place among the other passengers. His thick beard and unkempt hair only added to his rugged appearance, and the faint smell of livestock clung to him. He had spent the morning tending to his animals before rushing to the airport, unaware of the impression he would leave. As he made his way down the aisle to his seat, he could feel eyes on him. Some passengers looked at him with curiosity, others with slight distaste. But one woman, seated in first class, was particularly vocal. "Oh, goodness," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for him to hear. "What is that smell? It's as if the man rolled around in manure." Jacob, though taken aback, didn't respond. He simply settled into his seat. The woman, a millionaire named Victoria Grant, was well dressed in designer clothes and exuded an air of superiority. She had never been one to hold back her opinions, especially when it came to people she deemed beneath her. "You really should have cleaned up before getting on a plane," she continued, now speaking directly to him. "The odor is unbearable. Are you even aware of how offensive it is? You must work with animals." Jacob, who had spent his entire life with animals, was used to the scent. He shrugged and gave a quiet, "I take care of my farm animals every day." Victoria's face twisted in distaste. "Well, that's quite clear," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I don't know how they let someone like you into this part of the plane. You should be in the back with the rest of the unrefined people." The other passengers, already uncomfortable, looked away, but no one spoke up in Jacob's defense. He remained silent, staring out of the window, allowing the moment to pass. After all, he was used to being looked down upon, though he had never been openly insulted in such a way. The hours passed, and eventually the plane began its descent into New York City. As they landed and the passengers disembarked, Jacob slowly made his way to the exit. Victoria, meanwhile, was busy checking her makeup in the mirror, completely oblivious to the man she had humiliated. As Jacob stepped off the plane and into the terminal, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been treated unfairly. He had no desire to seek revenge, but he couldn't deny the sting of her words. He had worked hard his entire life, and here he was, mocked by someone who had never known the struggle of a working-class existence. Unbeknownst to Victoria, Jacob's life was far more extraordinary than she could have ever imagined. What she didn't know was that he was not just a simple farmer. Jacob Weaver had inherited a vast fortune from his late father, who had built an empire of successful businesses, but Jacob had never cared for wealth. He had turned his back on the corporate world, choosing to live simply and tend to his land. His wealth was tied up in investments and properties, hidden from the prying eyes of those who sought to take advantage of it. As Jacob walked through the airport, he noticed a luxurious car waiting outside, with a driver holding a sign bearing his name. A wave of nostalgia washed over him as he climbed into the back seat. He wasn't headed to some grand hotel, though. He had come to New York for one reason only, to visit his old friend Samuel, who had been like a brother to him. Samuel was now a well-known philanthropist, and Jacob had heard that his old friend was hosting a gala that evening. As Jacob entered the ballroom, he was greeted with surprise and admiration. News spread quickly that Jacob Weaver, the reclusive billionaire farmer, had arrived. People whispered excitedly, but Victoria, who was also at the event, had no idea who he was. She had long since forgotten about the encounter on the plane. As the evening wore on, Jacob stood at the bar, enjoying a drink, when Victoria approached him, unaware of his identity. "I never got the chance to apologize for my behavior on the plane," she said, flashing a bright smile. "I was a bit rude, and I regret it." Jacob turned to face her, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "It's all right," he said, his voice calm. "I've had worse things said to me." Victoria, eager to make amends, smiled again. "Well, I do hope you understand that I didn't mean to offend you. I just wasn't used to being around people who, well, let's just say, aren't familiar with the finer things in life." At that moment, Jacob's smile faded, and he leaned in closer, his voice low and firm. "I think you're the one who's unfamiliar with the finer things in life, Miss Grant. But that's okay. Not everyone knows how to appreciate real value." Victoria's smile faltered as Jacob walked away, leaving her standing in stunned silence. It wasn't until later that night, when she overheard some guests discussing the mysterious wealthy man who had just arrived, that she realized who she had just insulted. She spent the rest of the evening in a haze of embarrassment, realizing that she had humiliated a man whose fortune could have bought everything she owned, and more. But Jacob didn't need her apology. As he left the gala and returned to his simple life on the farm, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had learned that true wealth wasn't about money or status, but about living with integrity, doing hard work, and knowing your worth even when others couldn't see it. And from that day on, Victoria Grant never underestimated a man by the smell of his clothes again.